Hi, Sisira. My name is Nathan. It was really nice to hear you play. I think you play really well in general. It was really nice to listen to you. A couple of general things that I gathered from listening to you play. The first is that you have a tendency to play things very directly. And I don't mean in terms of tone, I mean in terms of time. That you kind of I think you have a tendency to rush, and you definitely don't take time in places where it would be appropriate. And I think that if you did, you would sound much more musical when you played. And so as we go through, I'm going to point out some of those things, some of those places. And another thing is you use a lot of harmonics. There are a couple of issues I have with that. The first is you can't vibrate harmonics. And sometimes when you're using them, it's notes that even if you didn't vibrate, there needs to be some strength and core to the pitch. And I'm not always getting that because you're using a harmonic. And then sometimes the harmonics are just not speaking, right? And so that's a noticeable thing that happens several times throughout. And I would encourage you to maybe consider limiting your use of harmonics to only when it's really needed. I have no problem with it in general, but I feel like there were a lot of uses of harmonics, and to me it started to detract from the piece. So I would just maybe reconsider some of those. Okay, so we're going to start with the sights. I'm just going to go through it from the beginning and talk you through a few things. I don't have measure numbers. Do I have letters? Does not appear to have measure numbers or letters. So you're going to have to get out the score that was submitted, which is a piano score, right? Because I'm going to reference page and line. And that's how I'm going to talk you through it, because I don't have another way of communicating where I am. So this is page 1, second line at your entrance, okay? When you come in, I know it's fortissimo. It was a little harsh. It was a little, so we don't want to crash into the first note. From the string, boom, right? That's what we want. Third line, second measure, beat 3. The A was a little out of tune. So that's the first part of beat 3. The next measure, so this is the third measure of the third line, the F sharp, we need to diminuendo on that note a little bit more. Ba-da-dum, ba-da, right? So you didn't really diminuendo on it, so you didn't really finish the phrase there. The next bar, so this is third line, last measure. The second note, the B, was a bit out of tune. The last line of this page, the second measure, the and of beat 2, that is supposed to be a harmonic there, but I didn't really hear it. It wasn't very clean. So just make sure your harmonics are going to speak. Probably you could use a little more weight from the left hand, just so that it really speaks. This is now page 2. Measure 1, beat 3, the A, intonation. And then the next bar, beat 1 and beat 3, so you have this ba-da-ba-da-bum, ba-da-ba-da-da-da-dum. Those eighth notes at the end of those slurs need to be a little bit longer. They were almost 16ths, and they're supposed to be eighths, right? So just a little bit longer. When we get to this this thing starting with the tranquillo with the B flats, da 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 da. There were some intonation things for that section. So I would just maybe play with the drone a little bit so you can really tighten up the intonation there. Moving to the end of this page, so this is the last line of page 2. Measure 1, there's a ritardando. I didn't hear it at all. And then it's a lar. I can't quite read it. I'm writing over it, but there's a largo basically, right? So it's supposed to be even longer, right? So we need to do the slow down and then play all the notes longer. And I would especially elongate the high D in the second measure. Da, ya, da, 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 right? So this is a phrasing thing. And then you have the cadenza at the end of that line. I think you could take much more liberty with your timing there. So I would do something like that bottom A. You know, this is your time to be dramatic, right? So I would take more time and be much more free with that cadenza. Don't surge on the 16th note at the end of this page. It actually is supposed to lead into the next thing, which is loud, right? But it's not a crescendo. It actually is an diminuendo. So da 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 da, right? That's how it's supposed to be. So we don't want to surge into the forte. It's subito forte, and we want to make sure we're kind of finishing the phrase a little bit more on that 16th note. This is page 3, last measure, beat 3, the end of beat 3. That D needed to be a little clear. I didn't really hear it. I think, again, maybe that might have been a harmonic, but it wasn't very clear on that note. Third line of the third page, mezzo forte, so I think it was a little bit too loud, and much more on the accents. D, da, 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 right? That's what we need to hear, right? So, da, 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 right? We need to hear that a little bit more clearly. Last line of page 3, the very first note was sharp, a little bit lower. Beat 4, first 2 notes were out of tune. Measure 2 of the last line, beat 3 and 4, were a little unclear. And then the third measure of the last line needs to be much softer. It's piano. And then there's the retardando. We need to do the piano, we need to do the retard. And then the last note of this page 3, needs to connect to the first note of page 4, right? So, right? It needs to actually connect to that note. You kind of went bum, bum, right? So make sure that you're thinking about the phrase there going from the end of page 3 into page 4. On page 4, first line, second measure, the and of 2 needs to be a little clearer. Same line, third measure, the C natural needs to be lower. And the fourth measure, the C natural, needs to be lower. They were both a bit high. The second line of page 4, the first measure, you did not count that half note correctly. You played a quarter note. Kudos to your pianist for finding you, but you need to make sure you're counting and playing the right rhythm there. Page 4, line 1, 2, 3, 4. Page 4, line 4, measure 2. The very last note I didn't really hear, it was unclear. Maybe harmonic there, I'm not sure, but it was unclear, whatever it was. Page 4, last line, first measure. The first note of beat 4, tone quality, didn't really speak well. And then the last measure of the last line. The E there, we need to have a better tone on that. And I would try saving your bow so that you can sustain that E a little bit longer and have a better quality of sound, because it was a little choked. Page 5, line 2, first note was flat, needed to be a little higher. And this whole section, so where it says allegretto, right, this whole 6/8 business, until you get to the deciso, or deciso, we need to play much more piano, much more tranquillo. The piano has leggero, which means light, right, in their part. So it needs to be softer, it needs to be more tranquil. It was a little bit, this is one of those examples if you played very directly, da 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 dee da da da, right? It needs to be ya da 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 dee ya da, it needs to be a little more musical, a little bit less direct and loud, and it's tranquil. It's like you're in a forest and you're having a nice sleep. It's that kind of sound. And then when you get to the deciso, right, then it can be a little bit more direct again. You need to play the right rhythm though. So this is the page 5, last line, measure 2. The first beat, we didn't get the right rhythm in there. The double stops in that line were pretty crunchy. I think you could make them a little bit lighter so they're not so harsh. Page 6, first line, last measure, beat 1, the E and C sharp intonation, and then line 2, the first two measures, the E to C intonation. Line number 3, last measure, we need to work on the clarity in beat 2. Last line of page 6, measure 3. That whole measure was unclear, rhythmically unclear, and I think left hand was a little bit unclear, and I think maybe you were rushing a little bit, so I didn't really hear all the notes. The very last note is short in comparison to what you did. It is a quarter note, which is not even a full beat, right? Because in this case, a full beat is a dotted quarter note, and I think you played it for at least 2 beats. So it's much shorter. Make sure that you do the ink when it comes to that rhythm. Okay. So now we're going to do some of the preludium and allegro. So I actually had surgery a couple weeks ago, so I'm not supposed to play my violin. So nobody else is getting to hear me play violin, but you are. And also, I haven't practiced in 3 weeks. So forgive any intonation things. But I wanted to play some of this for you because I really wanted you to get the idea here. It was very metronomic how you played it. And I don't think that's how it's supposed to be played. I think it's much more free, right? So even the first 2 notes. You know, it does not need to be in time. And I think you played it very in time, which then made it lack any kind of nuance in the phrase. It was just very kind of direct in the whole intro. So that's my main comment for the allegro portion of the preludium. So just much more free, and you can elongate, the notes that are leading up to the top of the phrase. Have your teacher work with you, but it's right now just way too in the box. This is a showpiece, right? So this is supposed to be your time to do whatever you want, versus like a concerto or a sonata where you have to be a little bit more rigid. This, you don't have to be rigid in terms of time. And in fact, I think later you took time in a couple places. There was some rushing happening. So you were less metronomic, later, but I think in the allegro, just take your time. So now a few specific things within the first portion of the allegro. I don't have measure numbers, but I think we can work with it. So this is measure 2, the second note intonation, the B. Measure 4, the last note intonation, the B there. No sliding between the first line last note and the second line first note. I would not do a slide there. I would most definitely not do a harmonic. Second line, measure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would most definitely not do a harmonic there. This allegro is assertive. Harmonics do not have an assertive tone, and so I wouldn't use one. Another place I wouldn't use a harmonic, third line, third note of the first measure. Wouldn't use a harmonic there either. Third line, third measure, last note, that A, out of tune. I think you could play a little bit more volume-wise on the A sharp. That is third line, last bar, first note. That A sharp, I would play a little bit more. And you do more retard from there to the end, right? This is like the thing, So, so let me go. Sorry, You know, that needs to be much more dramatic. Sorry about the wrong note. Haven't played this piece in a few years. But you get the idea that this is like high drama. Really, really slow it down and milk each note so that it's just like the most dramatic thing you could possibly think of. And then when you get to the andante, I'm going to try playing all the right notes this time. But so I would, first of all, the first note in the andante, long, right? Ba, and do a diminuendo. Ba, ya, da, da, da. And then I always start those a little bit more slowly, the 16th notes a little more slowly, and then move it along after. So da, ya, da, 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 da. And then again on the second line, so after the andante, the third bar, sustain, and then then kind of go forward, right? So that's how I would phrase it. So I'm going to count measure numbers. Andante is measure 1. So this is measure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 after the andante. The third note, the C, was a little out of tune. Another place definitely would not do a harmonic is measure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The first note would not do a harmonic there. So that was measure 7, 8, 9, 10 into 11. You did like a little slide somehow. You did like, and it was a little too much, you know. Like you barely played the B and then slid almost immediately, right? So I would do no slide and make sure that you play the B full value. I would not do a slide. So this is counting backwards from the tempo 1 we're coming up to. So counting backwards from that, 1, 2, 3 bars. I wouldn't slide down to the F after the first note. I'd make that a clean slide. Now, usually how I hear people play this, they get to the end of the andante. So you do a little diminuendo, and then they play the second time piano and start slowly. Usually that's what they do. And they take even more time on some of the notes. And this would be a great time if you want to play some harmonics. The second time through the tempo primo, play harmonics, right? I think that fits a little bit better. But when you get to the end of this line, we grow again. So probably wouldn't use any harmonics the last 8 to 12 measures. But the first line, I think you can be more free to use them there. However, I would try to avoid slides as much as possible. The very last note is the last of this page is the last note of the preludium, right? I would make it long. Ba, right? And then move on to the allegro, okay? In general, with the allegro dynamics, we need to have more dynamic contrast, especially soft stuff. And we do have measures here, which is great. Measure 4. I never listened to these twice because I don't think it's fair to go back and be really picky, so I might be wrong on what I think I heard. I think that you're not playing D sharp, the second beat of measure 4. There was something out of tune there. I think it was the D sharp. I would double check. Measure 5 and 6, intonation. Measure 9, piano. Measure 16, again, I think you didn't play D sharp on beat 2. And then we need to be much cleaner with the double stops. And I think you could take a little time you on like the downbeats of each bar. I think you could elongate those slightly and really be clean and in the string for all the double stops, so we can hear them all very, very clearly. Measure 29, piano. Measure 33 is forte. Measure 37 is piano again, right? So we need to go back and forth. It was mostly just forte. I would not play the chords in measure 33 and 37 so long. I play them a little bit shorter so it's closer to 16th notes. Measure 48, we need to finish the phrase a little bit more. You know, you can take a little time there to really show, hey, this back to that kind of first theme. Measure 53, beat 4, intonation. Measure 56, beat 1, that trill needs to be clearer. Measure 57, beat 1, that also needs to be clearer. I would say that this whole chunk, measure 52 until 64, your bow, I think, is bouncing a little bit too much and is making it unclean. So I would maybe keep the bow a little more on the string so that you can really clean all these notes up. Intonation for this next chunk. Again, I don't go back and listen to it, so I unfortunately can't be super, super helpful. However, I would go back and listen if I were you. 72 to 83 intonation was not as good as it can be. You also just kept getting faster and faster and faster, and I don't think you need to do that. And when you get to the chords in 84, that needs to be much broader. Bum ba ba bum 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 ba ba bum 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 bum. I mean, all these down bows are not there to see how fast you can bow. That's not the point. The point is to give each note maximum power, okay? And part of that is going to be making them a little bit longer. So if we try to play it just in time, we're not going to be able to give each note the absolute, like, chun, 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 right? So it's supposed to be a little bit slower and broader and a lot of bow. Measure 87, bum ba da dum yum bum ba yum ba da dum, right? That's like really, really broad. And then this is again the statement of what happened at the beginning, but now forte and an octave higher, right? Da yum ba da dum bum 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 bum. So take your time getting into 88 so that it's very dramatic. 93 downbeat intonation. I thought I heard an extra note in the next to last measure between beats, well, kind of like on beat 4, or 3, sorry. I felt like I heard an extra note in there, so just make sure that's really clean. Ba, ba, bum. And the last note needs to be a whole heck of a lot longer, right? You're slowing down, it's 3 beats plus a fermata, okay? So just really sustain and then end for the end, okay? So I think, in general, you play this really, really well, but there are a lot of, hopefully, you're getting a sense of like some things that you could do to really elevate what you're already doing really well. So best of luck on the competition and happy Thanksgiving.